It started as a way for me to spend winter evenings when I was an out-of-work actor, and it started to come together as a reality when I showed it to a director that I was next employed with, a man named Jim Sharman.
I went to the Royal Court and directed a Sam Shepard play called The Unseen Hand. In that play I cast Richard O'Brien. As a result of doing the musical, there were a lot of musicals coming my way, and Richard said he'd written a musical. I said, I hope it's not religious. He turned out to have written the one musical that got its own cult.
He was asked to do a play in the main house, and he said, well, I'd like to do that very much, but would you allow me 5 weeks' fun upstairs with this little play called The Rocky Horror Show?
It was initially done very modestly and with a lot of sense of fun.
It was the very first thing I'd ever written, and I didn't even see it as writing, really. To me, it was just like doing the crossword puzzle or painting a picture, making a collage. I just wrote some songs. I say just. I wrote some songs which I liked. And I wrote some gags which I thought were funny. I put in some B-movie dialogue and B-movie situations, and I was just having a ball.
The Royal Court Theatre, where it started, which is kind of virtually a room, was kind of rocking with the vibrations. It's almost too small for it to be contained, the show.
It was playing 63 people a night, and for 5 weeks, and with a budget of £2,000. And the rest is history. We ran in London, we transferred twice, we ran in London for 7 years.
I took the part because Marianne Faithfull was on a trip with her guru in India, so I got the part instead of her. I auditioned and I sang a really 1930s type song, and I knew it was a rock and roll thing, and I couldn't sing rock and roll things. So I sang a 30s song by a woman called Jessie Matthews, called Over My Shoulder, the songs. So these guys who were interviewing me, they really thought I was most peculiar.
Oh, how did I get the job? Oh, well, I was working as a soda jerk in London. And Jim Sharman, the director, came in with a couple of other people involved, Brian Thompson and Richard Hartley. And because he'd heard that I would do tap dances while I served people their ice creams. And I performed for them, and I was offered the job.
Then Richard sang to me science fiction.
It came from outer space, and this is how the message ran.
And I thought, that's the most wonderful song I've ever heard. I mean, it was wonderful. So I went bouncing down the road and thought, I've got to be in this, because this song sounded so fantastic. And my agent said to me, well, just a minute, you'll be singing that song, but maybe it's only a 4-line part. I mean, you don't know, you haven't read the script yet. So you must go down to the Royal Court Theatre this evening, pick up the script. I went down to the Royal Court Theatre, picked up the script. There was the song, and Magenta was 4 lines.
You're lucky. He's lucky. I'm lucky. We're all lucky.
I said, I don't give a shit. I'm going to do it because it's the best song I ever heard.
It was really when I first heard science fiction double feature that I was hooked on what Richard had written and the notion of doing the show, and was able to persuade others, fortunately, including the initial London producer, Michael White, and the Royal Court Theatre to let us stage it.
The people involved in it really put them like aspects of themselves into their work in the actual play. When it became successful in London, which was a big surprise to all of us, it then moved to Los Angeles. Lou Adler saw it and took it over to Los Angeles. We then did a production in Australia, and then there was talk about the film, and it just seemed to roll along quite naturally that we would do a movie of it.
As the weeks went by, I realised it was a great kind of cult success, and it was nice to be in something which people were coming many times to see. And people were enthusiastically responding. The average player that has come, and certainly in England, politely clap.
When we did it here in LA at the Roxy, I mean, you would, every night there was somebody different there, and people like Carole King would come dressed up as one of the characters. And anytime Keith Moon was in the audience, there would be 9 bottles of champagne lined up, and he was in there several times. And you'd see at the end of the thing, 9 bottles of champagne, and everybody go, oh, Keith Moon's here. And it was a thing, Raquel, everybody came, Elvis came. I mean, that's why I met Elvis Presley, and that was an amazing thing. I mean, he held court. He invited myself and Tim Curry to meet him after the show. And, that was, I'm going to tell you, that was worth it. you know, forever meeting Elvis like that.
I think that we'd all grown up with a kind of culture of late night movies, and this musical kind of encapsulated that, but of course it also, underneath that surface, which was, you know, slightly cartoonish and sexy and enjoyable, and musically very, very strong, it also had a kind of sophistication that I think that was there from the beginning, and I think that was also involved very much the original people that were involved in it. It was one of the reasons that when the film happened, that I was very concerned that a number of those original cast members stayed with it through to the film, and that indeed with the involvement of other people that came on board, people like Susan Sarandon and Barry Bostwick and Meatloaf and so forth, that we maintained that level of essentially quite sophisticated people who were kicking their heels up, I suppose is the obvious analogy.
There seemed to be a bit of a tendency to do it as a more of a science fiction film, and I was a little bit against this because I thought that there was a bit more to it than that.
Probably the biggest question in turning it into a film was the kind of film that it would be. And I seem to remember an initial discussion with the producers whereby one was offered a reasonable budget and circumstances to make it, providing we stocked the film with kind of, you know, currently fashionable rock stars. The alternative was to use people like Tim Curry and so forth, who were in the original production, and do it on a very tight shooting schedule. I think it was about 6 weeks, with a very modest budget. And I went for that option, and that was probably a very crucial decision in relationship to everything that followed.
The whole nature of the film changed when we saw Oakley Court, which was used as the house in the film. What happened was that we were shooting out at Bray Studios, which is out on the Thames River past Windsor Castle, and next to it was what they called the Old House, which had been used for all the old Hammer horror films. And the guys there kept saying, "Do you want to go and see the Old House? Do you want to go and see the old house?" And Jim and I kind of said, "Oh, well, yeah, sure, maybe, let's go and have a look." The minute we saw it, we realised that this gave us the basis for the whole look of the movie. I always thought it should be done in a very sort of a tacky sort of a way, and in fact, after going to see a movie in London, it had this girl dressed up in this really sort of drab sort of costume with an ice cream tray, walked down the front of the cinema and turned around and looked at the audience, and all this little spotlight came on her, and that gave us the start. That gave us the beginning of the way of doing the show, which was to set it in a kind of a derelict or a falling down cinema, so that we could do everything pretty much on the cheap. That was the reality of the situation. So I'd been looking for a kind of a through line from that into the film. Oakley Court was a fantastic old mansion that was under threat of demolition, and the people who had owned it took the lead off the roof, so that because they wanted to demolish it and use the land for something else, but it had a preservation order on the house. So by taking the lead off, the whole house had become totally kind of rotten inside, and that just gave us a wonderful look. I mean, the idea being that Frankenfurter and his and the people from outer space had landed and had chosen to stay in this place. That was the kind of the basis of the start of the film. Everybody who worked on the film was able to put into the movie things that they might have been obsessed by themselves at that particular time. That was the first time that, 1972 was the first time that I'd actually ever been to England or to Europe. So I'd been quite fascinated by seeing all of those, the Louvre and the paintings there, the Sistine Chapel, all of the wonderful sort of things that I'd seen little photos of, but I'd never seen for real. And it just occurred to me personally that this would be a fantastic thing to include in the film, as though Frankenfurter himself had suddenly discovered all these things and wanted them for his home. And when I'm very fastidious about detail, they say, why are you worrying? I say, now listen, in 5 or 10 years' time, we might be asked about this prop. Why is this glass here? Why is this? What's that note on the wall? All those kind of things. And I think that was something that I've just found that all that truth is incredibly important. And I also find it makes it fun. I think you've got to believe, when you work in a film, you've got to believe everything about it. So you've got to actually make sure that every scene that you do, everything in it's real, right? That's the important thing. Well, real for those characters. We wanted to place it very firmly in kind of Middle America. I mean, not that I knew what Middle America was, except that I knew that they had kind of nice white churches. And we built that just outside of, in fact, that was in a paddock opposite the house and just down from the studio. And all it was really, it was just the facade of that church. It was just to sort of set up normal, you know, Brad and Janet were very normal, and you'll obviously be aware of the fact that we set it on the date of Nixon's resignation. This was a very conscious decision so that we could kind of place it in history. There was actually a line that Brad had in the play, which was, he said,
it's probably some kind of hunting lodge for rich weirdos.
And I thought, I wonder what a hunting lodge for rich weirdos look like. It shouldn't be heads of, you know, normal things that you have, you know, mounted on a wall. And so I had things like cats and dogs, and because Frankenfurter didn't understand what people on Earth did with these things, which is I think why Brad referred to it as being a hunting lodge for rich weirdos. That was a starting point, and that was actually in the house proper. And we built the elevator in the sort of stairwell area there. I'd just been to Amsterdam, and I'd stayed in a really terrific sleazy hotel, which had off the kind of little bedroom and had a bathroom which was done in these pink tiles. And I took photos of this, and I thought that I could imagine Frankenfurter thinking that pink tiles was a good look. And that was the so that was the way that all started. The whole shape of it came from it actually came from the architecture of the house, but also it came from the fact that I just thought it needed to have that sort of slightly sort of theatre quality about, so that you had a little stage where, you know, Frank and Rocky could go into the bedroom with the curtains, and you had the kind of viewing platform for the Transylvanians. The idea of the birth of Rocky just came from a different idea, rather than, because, you know, I knew how all these other kind of Frankenstein films were done, and I liked the idea of it being done by colour, and that the way that Frank had worked it out was that you just had to create a rainbow, and that's how he created built the creature. And that was the you know, the scene where he adjusting all the colours. That was to form a kind of a perfect spectrum in the tank. And in fact, on the day that we were shooting that, I had to, no one knew what the colours were, so I had to stand there and yell out to Timmy the colours. And if you watch the way that Tim Curry fumbles around to get those knobs, that was because he didn't know where they were. We tricked him. The idea for the thing that came down with the big balls on it was, the idea of that was looked like a big sort of a cocktail shaker, you know, as though Frank was going to kind of make himself a cocktail. I just wanted to make it exceedingly eclectic. In other words, bits and pieces from all over the place. In the house there was a very, very small ballroom, which we took a lot of castings off all the detail there, and we built the big room and the pool. Well, originally, that in the background to the pool, it was the RKO Pictures Tower. What I actually designed for that was a 20th Century Fox logo, and the idea was that we were going to have, you know, in the background of the logo there's the searchlights. They were going to be big bits of plywood on strings that Columbia and Magenta were going to be pulling, so it would be kind of jerking across the stage like that. I mean, the whole idea was to make it very kind of theatrical, and then just to kind of include the sort of the slightly Esther Williams kind of quality, so that Frank could take all his new chums for a swim. The taking off of the house was actually, we started building a full model of the house. It was going to be much, like, really big, and we ran out of money and we couldn't do it. And then someone said, look, we'll just do it by cutting a cardboard cutout. And that's what it was. It was just a cardboard cutout, a photo of the house, right, in front of the house. It just got, if you look at it very closely, you can see quite clearly the house is still in the background. It was a very low-tech special effect. In fact, it wasn't even a special effect, it was just an effect. I mean, that was the whole nature of the film, was that we didn't want it to have any of those kind of big tricks. When the executives from 20th Century Fox came over and we were filming the dining scene, I don't think I've ever seen people look more shocked in my life at what we were actually doing, because when we were setting the whole dining scene up, I just became aware of the fact that actually Magenta wasn't a very good maid, and Riff Raff certainly wasn't a very good butler, and they wouldn't know. They'd think, oh, people have lots of forks, you know, people have lots of knives, and so the whole idea of that came from them thinking they knew what to do, but in fact they didn't know what to do at all, and they were wonderfully incompetent.
It did every cliche in the book about every B movie. And I think even unbeknown to people who hadn't even seen those B movies, It clicks as a cliche thing, you know.
We were more interested in the 50s science fiction films where things were done on the cheap and it all looked like cardboard. And the films that I mentioned in the opening song, The Day the Earth Stood Still, those kind of movies, they're the kind of ones that I was more interested in. And we did view a lot of those at that time. The other film that we were interested in at the time was Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, the Russ Meyer film. So, I mean, we were kind of pretty eclectic in our taste at the time.
There is an element in that film of a kind of elaborate. I mean, in one sense it has a cartoon element to it, but also, or comic strip perhaps more appropriately, element to it. But it also has an element of a home movie, and I think that I think that some of the best films may be technically quite flawed, but they have something of the kind of edge and kind of humanity of a kind of this is kind of a home movie for fairly extraordinary people. There may well have been other actors that auditioned initially for the role of Frank. I can't remember them. I just remember that Tim Curry walked in the door of the Royal Court Theatre saying "Rip it up" and got the role. He ripped it up.
I made you, and I can break you just as easily.
Susan Sarandon and Barry Bostwick were obviously in the film version was the American casting. They at that point in time were both kind of emerging stars, but they certainly at that point in time would have been something that they were that would be in very much the early part of their film careers. They just seemed somehow or other perfect for it. But again, they had that quality whereby they were able to play the roles, but they also understood there was a kind of irony that's required, that's of a particular kind to play the kind of material that Richard had written, and they had that. And I think that all of those actors brought a great deal to the finished film.
Janet!
Dr. Scott!
Janet!
Look!
One of the remarkable assets of it, given that once things grow, and Rocky certainly grew from a very small theatre production through umpteen stage versions all over the world into a film, was the way that we were able to maintain the kind of family, as it were, that had originally created it all the way through, and all of those people contributed enormously to it, but also the spirit of that being kept alive was something that has also translated in the film, and so that the contributions of Richard Hartley working with Richard O'Brien on the music, of Brian Thompson and Sue Blaine on the design side, which in the film was then augmented by the cinematographer Peter Sajitsky and Graham Clifford, the editor in particular. All of this played a major role in the film, because in the case of people like Brian, Sue, Richard Hartley and so forth, they had actually travelled the entire journey from a small production in the theatre upstairs at the Royal Court in London all the way to a fairly major motion picture. One of the qualities about Rocky Horror in all its forms was that there was a kind of, it was in essence a first work. It was Richard's first musical, and it was full of his enthusiasms in the way that first works always are. As it happened, those enthusiasms were then shared by a lot of other people. But I also think that everybody else involved with it, brought some of those enthusiasms, and there are kind of echoes of those in the film. I can think of a number of them, and they're very, very disparate ones. In the case of the Transylvanians, there's kind of there's almost a lineage there back to the Munchkins in The Wizard of Oz, with the sped-up voices singing, "We're out of the woods," etc., etc., to "Let's Do the Time Warp Again," which we also deliberately recorded and sped up the voices on. There were many more echoes and influences through the film. They included one of my favourite filmmakers, F.W. Murnau, who made the original Nosferatu. When we were doing the original stage productions, the film element was already there, because I remember suggesting to Richard at one stage that the trio the trio needed a dance, and the point of reference I gave to him was curiously in a film that's miles away from Rocky Horror, which is Bonaparte of Jean-Luc Godard, where the three gangsters dance the Madison in the cafe. It's also interestingly the dance that inspired the dance in Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction between Irma Thurman and John Travolta. So that's the kind of level of, when I talk about the fact that the film is invested with, on one hand, a very popular kind of comic strip surface. Underneath that, it's also invested with a very sophisticated set of sensibilities, which was not certainly only mine, but that of many of people involved in it, including some of the cast.
The fact that it's lasted, I think, is partly due to the enormous quality of the design. I mean, I think both the costume designer and the film designer were incredibly talented and created a look that could last this long.
Our whole idea of the film was to make it very theatrical, and the film was in fact going to open with, like you were going to see red velvet curtains, right? And they were going to open on a black and white screen, and the film was going to have no colour up until that first zoom up onto Frankenfurter's face, and the only colour was going to be his red lips. And so, in fact, if you watch the film, what's happened, the only colour that's come into it has actually been added by lighting, because the ballroom was conceived as a black and white set. And that was one of the things. It was a bit like The Wizard of Oz. The idea was that once they met Frankenfurter, then the colour would come in. But the studio felt that the techniques weren't there for it to be done effectively.
We made it a movie about 2 years after its original opening, and the movie was made for about $1.25 million, and it bombed when it came out. It did no business.
The early previews were not successful at all. I mean, that's being kind to it. We had a lot of walkouts and a lot of people that were offended, mostly because it's obvious now you couldn't spring it on the general public, and especially it depended on what films you previewed with, because the film that was showing there creates the audience that's going to preview a film. And there was nothing anywhere near Rocky Horror that was at that time playing theaters, so we would be playing with things that were just the total opposite, and everything was the opposite of Rocky Horror at that time. But we did find that amongst the audience were, in small numbers, but very appreciative and almost, well, they would thank us at the end. You know, they'd search us out and say, "Thanks for making that kind of film. You've made a film that is for us, or that we really wanted to see." And also satisfying was that people that had seen the play around the Los Angeles area would say we had done right by the play. We hadn't misused the play. And so we were satisfied creatively that we had done what we set out to do as filmmakers. The next step was exhibition.
About a year later, it started to play the late night circuit.
I don't think there were cult films then, were there? I mean, I suppose Todd Browning's Freaks or something. No, I mean, no. I mean, I hoped it was going to be a hit, and then it came out and very definitely wasn't. So, you know, I went back to England.
It opened in London. It was a complete flop. It wasn't until I saw the film in 1977 in New York at the Waverley with the full-on crowd participation, and that was the time when I realised that somehow we'd struck something. They said, "Well, gee, we thought it was pretty boring, and we thought if we yelled back, you know," and they were trying to have fun with the film. And I think, as that was the very spirit in which we'd done the film anyway, it just seemed like it sort of caught on.
The success of Rocky Horror came out of the failure of Rocky Horror. I think if Rocky Horror had come out and been moderately successful, it might be gone today. The fact that it failed and we had to look for an alternative way of exhibiting it was added to what became the phenomenon.
No, we never could imagine it. I mean, even when we were rehearsing the little play, we never realised that was going to be such an enormous success. It was the little theatre it was in held 60 people. And we all thought it was a great show, but we had no idea that would be such a smash, and this is just another thing entirely. Particularly because it was a delay. You know, years passed, 5 years I think, before the film really took off.
Who could have imagined that? I couldn't. But all I know is when I first went to see the film in London with Little Nell, I was a total fan of the film. The audience at the time weren't. They all said, oh, the show was so much better. But she and I sat together and we yelled and screamed like everyone else does all the time.
I think it appealed to people's sexuality. I think the theme line, don't dream it, be it. Hit a nerve at a time when people were much more conservative and it just was like, just let rip. And people did. And that whole sort of transsexual, you know, AC/DC thing that most people have in them was allowed to be expressed.
Camp, kitsch and schmaltz. Was it the work parodies many kind of forms of entertainment and of that time?
I have no idea. Maybe you shouldn't try to figure it out, you know. Maybe it's just like love. You shouldn't try to dissect it, just enjoy it.
Speaks to the young people of today about the loss of innocence. It's a rite of initiation. The music is wonderful. The characters are so identifiable. I mean, you can really find something in that movie to identify with. And it's offbeat. It's fresh for midnight. It's perfect for midnight. And then once the audience participation began, there are people who are attracted to that. So there's a whole many different plateaus of attraction. Some people attracted for Tim Curry's performance, other people for the total movie, to Richard O'Brien, to Susan, whatever. Right place, right time. I've heard many different answers, and I believe it's a combination of all those things.
Every Saturday, there's a guaranteed party, whether you have a date or not.
Whatever happened to Saturday night? Yes, here he is. Yes, it is. It's Tim Curry.
So comforting to know there are so many people in this world sicker than I am. I think I'm the only person here tonight who doesn't look like me.
It's still playing here in Sydney on a Friday night, and I go along, you know, occasionally, every couple of years or something. And I do find it extraordinary to see new generations of people still enjoying the film. I mean, I think the best thing about the film is that it hasn't dated. I mean, it seems as fresh as it was all those years ago. It doesn't have any, and there's nothing, and I think that's because it never was a kind of a film to do with fashion. There was never, people aren't wearing flares or any of that kind of thing. So, I mean, it's quite a, it was obviously quite smart in the way we did it, but we didn't quite know we were doing it, I think.
The film still runs once a week on, I think it's Friday night, and there's a smaller version, but nothing compared to America. They don't, get into the frocks quite so much. Americans seem to be more manic in that way, more obsessive, and the way that they identify so much with the characters and want to imitate them. The English are far more repressed and cool. They don't like to get around in fishnets quite so much. But the Americans just love that. They're more flamboyant in many ways.
A lot of these kids who perform in these shows and who get off on all of this sort of stuff will keep it alive for longer, and they'll pass it down to their younger brothers and sisters too as they go off to college or into the business world.
It has been passed on from generation to generation, from brothers and sisters and parents to their children, and somewhat of a rite of passage.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's probably the first time that the audience has been as much, if not a greater part of the creative process than the people that made it.
Damn it! I knew I should have gotten that spare tire fixed.
Now, what I want to know is how many people out here actually play Brad Major? Yeah, right. 2%, right? 2%. What, is he boring? What? Huh? Okay, wait a minute. All the people who play Brad Majors, I want them all to say, along with me, damn it, Janet. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Damn it, Janet. I've got nothing to say, and that's damn it, Janet. I love you.
I think the opportunity to dress up and make believe. I think we all need to make believe. I'm lucky that that's my job, and I get paid to do it. But I know there's amateur dramatics, beauty pageants, Miss Junior America. All this cheerleading. It's all a need to an exhibitionist kind of need. There's nothing wrong with it.
They're closet actors, I don't know.
I really love that rock and
In terms of not doing anything for my career, I don't think I've ever gotten another film based on it, but I think that I'm real pleased to have that extra audience.
It was the most joyous thing to do, and I think it's given immense pleasure to lots of people. It's given me a lot of pleasure.
It took me to LA and New York and into my first film, which Rocky Horror was my first film.
I thought it was a big adventure.
And when I was shooting it, it was great. And when I saw it in Philadelphia for the first time, I thought it was terrible. And then I saw it again with an audience full of people, because in Philadelphia there was no one there. Saw it with an audience full of people, and I said, this is great.
Brian's kind of bumbled with that white plastic bell. I taste the baby pink lips and that's with a nail. She was feeling like a tonight. Get back and run, put some hair all on Buddy Holly was singing his very last song. When you're under and you're there, you try to sing along. Feel pretty good.
I had a vision when I was underwater. The scene when we were all underwater and and we were all kissing and hugging and everything. I had this vision that perhaps in about 3 or 4 years I saw thousands of kids dressed up in fishnet stockings, kissing each other's thighs in neighborhood swimming pools. And my God, it's come true, hasn't it? I think about the time Susan Sarandon stepped on my toe in 4.5-inch spike heels, and it's on film. You see it in the movie. It's right at the end when we're on stage. And what else do I remember? I remember trying to dance in 5-inch heels myself, wet, coming out of the pool, dressed in a Merry Widow. These are moments that I'll never be able to recapture. Who's going to ask me from now on in my career to dress up in that kind of costume? I'll never forget the time that they covered my entire body with plaster to make a plaster casting of my whole body, to make that statue that happens on the end. Never forget how bloody cold it was when we would get out of the pool all the time. We were always wet, you know, because we were running around in underwear all the time.
Nothing has stopped it. I mean, 3 administrations at Fox couldn't kill it, and Ronald Reagan couldn't kill it. So I don't see what could stop it.
I think I'll be doing the Time Warp when I'm 90.
I'm happy with it as it is, as you know, as a kind of home movie about some pretty extraordinary people that lived at a particular moment in time and that somehow or other ended up entertaining the whole world.
Science fiction, double feature. Frank has built and lost his creature.